Hello my friends, fellow VEDS, and we're in the top 5 MCU films. Now, if you've been paying attention, you've probably figured out which ones they are. Though I doubt you'll have gotten the order right, because it was surprising even to me. Number 5, Iron Man. Okay, so let's get it out of the way. Without this film, the rest of the MCU wouldn't exist. That's not my opinion. That's something Kevin Feige says. But aside from the fact that it's where the MCU really starts, it's also one of the most interesting character studies of all of them. Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark. Like, that's just a fact at this point. And this movie just does such a great job of highlighting what Tony Stark is at his core. He's a traumatized man who has been hiding his emotions, who is manipulated and has to be a better person. It's just so good to this day. It really understands who he is and what he's about and how the people in his life have shaped him and changed him, and oh god, it's just so good. Also, can we please bring back Jensen? I know he died, but like, can we have like a talk or something? Time is gonna be fucked with in Avengers 4 anyways. Let's just have a talk between Tony and Jensen, or Peter and Jensen, or let's just bring back Jensen. Even if it's just Tony talking about him. I want to hear about Jensen again. It's been too long, and he's so important. But yeah, I can't really say anything that hasn't been said 1,000 times about this movie. Except maybe some of the Jensen stuff. He doesn't get nearly enough credit. It's just so good and so iconic and so important. Number 4, Spider-Man Homecoming. The way Robert Downey Jr. is Iron Man, Tom Holland is Spider-Man. A lot of the MCU actors, the majority of them, are so perfect, but these two really are ones where anybody else would have completely and utterly failed, I think. And speaking of Peter and Tony, their dynamic is so interesting. I mean, there's a reason most of the fanfics I write these days are about them. They just have such a unique dynamic. We always wanted the Avengers to be like a found family type story. Here it is. Here's our found family. It's only 2 of them, but still. And Michael Keaton is someone I don't normally care for, but in this movie, I love Michael Keaton. He is such a good villain, and the contrast between the 3 of them is so interesting and so engaging. And the twist involving Michael Keaton's character and how he relates to Peter is... I didn't see that one coming, I'm gonna admit that. I gasped in the theater. One of the things that this film did was it created probably the best cinematic high school. And I don't mean that as in I would necessarily want to go there. I'm saying that as in, yeah, they got it right. Like, compared to so many other films that really tried to play into the cliches that we've been using since John Hughes movies, which I love, but come on, they're not that accurate. At least they aren't anymore. I don't know if they were then. So many movies want to play into these cliches, and Spider-Man Homecoming just kind of doesn't. Like, it's diverse, and cliques aren't really that big of a deal, and, you know, a nerd can bully another nerd, and it's just so interesting, and it's so realistic. But yeah, Spider-Man Homecoming just creates a high school environment that makes so much sense for a Peter Parker who is gonna actually be like, you know, high schooler. And making Peter Parker feel like a real kid is part of what makes this movie so goddamn successful. And it's the best high school movie in a long ass time, while also being a really fun superhero movie, and that's just impressive. Number 3, Captain America, the First Avenger. Okay, so let's get some confessions out of the way. 1, I'm a sucker for 40s aesthetics. 2, Peggy Carter is my favorite superhero. I know she shouldn't count, but I wrote a college essay once on how Peggy Carter was my favorite superhero. I didn't get the scholarship, but Peggy Carter is my favorite superhero. Still such a cool movie. Having it so 40s really makes Steve being the man out of time perfect, and God. It's a cliche fest. There are so many cliches in this movie, but it's also so awesome. And I'm willing to forgive it of some of its cliches for its awesomeness and its aesthetic and having one of the most awesome female characters I've ever seen. And holy shit, Skinny Steve, those effects are insane. I've watched so many behind the scenes things about how they made that effect, and it still blows my mind. And Skinny Steve is really what I love about this movie, because it shows who Steve Rogers is, who Steve Rogers wants to be, and who the world grows to see him as, which becomes the tragedy. He isn't Captain America, but that's what everyone wants. So yeah, I love the tragedy of him that they set up here. I love the aesthetic of World War II. I love Peggy Carter. So I love Captain America, the First Avenger. Number 2, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Okay, so I'm not gonna lie, I was so scared to have a Guardians of the Galaxy sequel. I loved the first one, and I didn't think they were going to be able to do it justice. However, I was wrong. I was really, really wrong. Everything I liked about the first movie, they did better. They created a better villain. They created a better color scheme. They created a bunch more interesting relationships between the characters. Instead of just being a group, there were the interpersonal relationships. And the things that I didn't like so much about the first one, they changed. They made Nebula so much more interesting. The villain in this is awesome. I mean, I love Kurt Russell, but doing this to Kurt Russell was fucking brilliant. And Yondu, who I liked but didn't love, became a character who I adored, and I cry every time I watch Guardians Volume 2. And this was another time when I actually didn't see the twist coming. I mean, I saw the Kurt Russell is evil twist coming, but I didn't see the Kurt Russell killed his mom twist coming. But yeah, I loved everything about this movie. It felt so personally tailored to what I wanted the next movie to be, even down to the soundtrack. The very first song they play in this movie is Brandy, which is a song that I never really met anyone else who liked outside of my family. It was a song I associated a lot with the Jersey Shore and driving to the beach when I was little, and I didn't know anyone else who liked it. So to walk into a movie and see Kurt Russell and hear that song both at the same time was fucking awesome. And you know what's even better than that? Having Brandy, having a tiny transition, and then immediately going into Mr. Blue Sky, my favorite song I ever did in concert band. This is how you do a sequel right. everyone grows, everyone changes, they aren't static, they don't revert back to their original state at the beginning of the first movie. Progress is made, and it's interesting, and you listen to the fans' complaints. If you've been keeping track, you will realize that number 1 is Avengers Infinity War. I did not expect this to be number 1. If Guardians 2 or Captain America 1 had been number 1, I would have expected that. But Infinity War, I didn't really think would be this high. But when I think about this movie and all of the things I enjoyed about it, it did everything better. It was way more dramatic than any other MCU film got. It was funnier than several of them. It had way more interesting crossovers. It was hilarious. It was heartbreaking. It was everything you could have wanted. People like to compare comic book characters now to what the Greek gods were back then. And if that's the case, this is our Greek tragedy. And it's such a good tragedy because the characters weren't being stupid. It wasn't because of some easy to fix flaw or some obvious glaring plot hole. The heroes lose. The heroes lose everything. And it makes sense. And while you're not okay with it, it wouldn't have made sense to go any other way. Everything they did in this movie worked so well, and basically every criticism I've heard about this movie either comes down to not understanding why a character does something that's illogical, usually because personality, or basic personal preference. It's just the perfect way to culminate 10 years of building a universe of heroes by giving a hero that's even stronger and making that the villain. And I'm not saying that Thanos is a hero, I'm saying that Thanos sees himself as a hero. He's the protagonist of the story, but he's not necessarily a good guy. Also, holy shit, Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good. That scene fucked me up. I'm still not over it. I will never be over it. And so those are my rankings of the MCU films. Are you surprised? I certainly am. In the comments, tell me more about what you think. Am I full of shit? I'm probably full of shit to some of you. And I'll see you guys later.